questions at the end, because we're very much still in the implementation phase of all this. But yeah, so my name is Lauren Chioco Axford. I work for the Town of Bethlehem, which we are in Albany County, New York, but it's not very far from here. It's less than 2 hour drive. And I think a lot of the issues that we're dealing with in New York, as far as farmland protection, availability to farmers, and farmland access, I mean, it doesn't matter really which state you're in, it's the same issues. And some of the things that we're working on, if you get any ideas that you can take home to your municipality, I think we're at that place where we all have a role to play. And certainly with everything going on at the federal level, I think that the ability to focus on our local communities, our local municipalities is really what we need to do right now. At least that's what I'm going to do. Um, so yeah, just to give you a little background about myself, my background is mostly in farming. I have degrees in farm management and agro-environmental science. I worked on a lot of different farm operations, from conventional dairy to industrial greenhouse production, and then got into organic farming and agriculture, and just like I was like, oh, this is farming. This is what I was looking for, as well as native plant production. So now in this role of open space coordinator for the town, it's really a farm adjacent role. I work with private landowners in the town and do what you need to do. Sorry. I work with private landowners in the town that have 5 acres or more, to help them sort of explore what their conservation options are if they have those desires. We're a town that used to historically was really mostly a farming community. And so the landscape and the times have changed greatly. We're definitely more of a suburban community now. And oh, it's still there. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. So in this role, I'm also the lead staff for the Historic Heath Farm Initiative. So I'll be giving you an overview of what that is. But the town, we in 2023 closed on a 307-acre farm property that was owned by a developer who had every intention of developing in it. And, we worked with about 4 years of discussions with him and finally got to a point where he agreed to sell it to the town at the assessed value, not the full market value. The assessed value still was $3 million. So it was a lot, but it was 307 acres, as well as a historic barn complex, a former dairy barn, 2 residential structures, one historic in nature, but both had previously been converted to 2-unit residences. So when we think about the need for farmer housing and farm worker housing, we suddenly have these assets that could be really useful. I'm not really good with computers, so you can, no, see? Oh no, where'd she go? All right, there we go. Okay, so this is an overview. So the farm is 307 acres. It's really split into 2 groups. We have one in the north end of town, in the hamlet of Glenmont, one in the south. So this is the north end of the town. This is 1952. You can see the intersection with the orchard right across the street, and there's a barn complex. So this is the farm property, and you can see that most of the area around it was also farm or just woodlands. We have a lot of tributaries and town. We're just, we are along the west side of the Hudson River. And this land also, which mentions the ancestral homeland of the Stockbridge Munsee of the Mohican Nation. And so, it's good to acknowledge that at the municipal level, it's not always done. So it's something that we have a lot of work to do within our own municipality. It's a lot of education opportunities moving forward. But this was during construction of I-87. And so when they constructed I-87, it really destroyed a lot of farms. I was just talking to a 95-year-old in town yesterday who grew up on a 150-acre farm, and through eminent domain, they took about 2/3 of the farmland to create this interstate, and so that was pretty much the end of the farm for him and his family. Okay, so this is the same aerial today in 2024. So as you can see, there's a lot of residential development happening all around. The threat of development to this farm property that we were able to buy was, very real, very imminent. And so we're trying to preserve what we can and also, return it to more of a viable situation. But I'll give you just a little overview of the historic farm. So what we now call the historic Heath Farm was Heath's Shady Lawn Dairy Farm. It was really well known in the community for generations. Really iconic. If you talk to anyone older, older generation in the town, they remember going there as a kid, maybe on a school field trip. The dairy farm had an observation window into the milking parlor, so you could come and you could see how milk was produced and have that connection. Um, they also hosted school field trips. They had a store on site. So they're already like sampling into like agritourism before it was a thing. They also, in the 70s, would till up, some acreage for community use, so for community gardens. And they went from like 14 community gardeners to over 250 in a couple years. Right, so here's some photos, historic photos. So the farm bottled its own milk. They also had a home delivery service, and again, just having that ultra local food connection. The picture of the barn at the very bottom here, this part was built in 1840, and then additions to the farm were made in the 1880s and then in the 1950s as well. This is an aerial of the farm in 1975. Unfortunately, shortly after this, the William Heath, who was the head farmer, he passed away, and the family sold the farm to someone that just really couldn't keep up. The dairy industry was already, kind of tanking. Just so many challenges to that, and so that's when our developer friend purchased the farm in the 90s. So I think it's probably helpful to provide a little context about conservation in our town. So in 2017, the town really started to increase conservation efforts, and that included hiring a creating a part-time position for open space coordinator. And it's really, I think if you're in a town that doesn't have a dedicated staff person to really move these things forward, it's really hard because as I've learned that land protection and working with farmers, it's really relationship based. If there's no trust, there's no way of moving forward. And when we're talking about protecting farmland in perpetuity, I mean, perpetuity is a very long time. And so that's not a decision that people go into lightly. So you really need to work with the landowner, getting a good sense of what their vision is, for their lifetime, beyond their lifetime. And so it takes a lot of time. So that's one, key takeaway is that to have a dedicated, even if it's just a part-time position, it really helps move things forward. In 2019, the town board passed the Farms and Forests Resolution, which created a dedicated fund for conservation. So for the purchase of development rights from farmland, the outright, fee acquisition, so purchasing land outright to protect it. And we also have, that's really what made the purchase of this possible. So in 2022 is when we reached our purchase agreement with the developer who owned the land. And it went to the public and went to vote, and it got really heated. It was very political. There was many lawn signs. There were like nasty posts on the next door website. It was just it got a little crazy, and honestly I was like taken aback because I'm a farmer, not a politician, so I was like, what is this? But this opportunity came on the heels of our town's comprehensive plan update. And so there was a whole like year and a half of public meetings going through that process of updating the comprehensive plan. And at every single one of those meetings, there were people from the public making public comment about how important open space was, how important farmland was, and how the town really needed to prioritize saving those areas. Because again, we're near the capital of Albany. It's a desirable area to live. We have a lot of new subdivisions going in all the time. We're a lot of solar developments as well. And so I think people were starting to really see how close development was getting to all of our remaining farmland. So Proposition 2, this is one of our nicer, more positive lawn signs that came up. It passed by 61% of voters, which is great. So we were very excited by that. And we were able to purchase the land a little later in early 2023. So this is an aerial, and you can see just how close the development was coming. That intersection there, we were able to purchase 4 corners of that intersection. Of course, the 4th corner is being all developed. So that blank area of soil now has 96 brand new, very expensive condos. And so it's not affordable housing. It's not what we need in town, but it's there as part of the planning department. It's interesting because I work in the planning department. So they're the ones working with all the developers, getting these subdivisions passed through, working with solar developers. And here I am, like, let's save it all. And so it's good to be able to know what's going on, though, because as part of the permitting process, we requested that they put in a multi-use access path along the road so you can sort of see it along the road. And knowing that one day we wanted to create a destination, we wanted people in the community to be able to get to the farm. We wanted the farm to be this vital, vibrant place in the community where the community could come together and really support local agriculture. So it's there now. There's a crosswalk to nowhere. There's like a crosswalk to the hayfield at this point. But we were setting ourselves up for the future. So the main goal of purchasing this farm property was really to save it from development, the imminent threat of development. And then with that goal complete, we were kind of like, all right, the town supervisor and leaders were kind of like, okay, we're done, we're good. And I was like, oh, but what are we going to do with the land now? Just keep leasing it. I will say there has been a farmer leasing the land for about 10 plus years. It's a sixth generation dairy farm, conventional dairy farm. They're successful, and the way that they've been successful is they are buying up farms here left and right, left and right, left and right. So they have no issue with land access. The interesting thing is a sixth generation farmer, he understands that privilege. He understands that he has generational wealth, understands like he can't even fathom how a first generation farmer gets into the business because there's some real challenges. And so it's great that he is willing to sort of think outside of the box and beyond his own farm operation. So that's really wonderful. So we did, after purchasing the land, we did do like a 1 year interim lease. And we put it out, to bid. He was the only applicant because he was the only person that could farm that much. We weren't offering any infrastructure at the time. And so we had that interim 1 year lease to really ensure that the land stayed in production. So the last thing we want to do is like pull the rug out of someone who's like, aside from our differences as far as, agriculture, like what I think of conventional dairy agriculture farming, we wanted to support his operation. He's been a good steward of the land. Um, so we have this role. I mean, we have this opportunity now to really address some critical issues in our section of agriculture and farming and the environment, as well as community well-being. And so our town supervisor said, okay, well, whatever you want to do, just run with it. And I was like, really? He was like, yeah, just run with it. I was like, are you sure? And I asked him 3 times to make sure. And I said, okay, pull up, here we go. So I'm very excited. So as a former farmer, a recovering farmer, if you will, um, I saw a lot of potential. So this is a picture of that same 1840s barn, right after we closed on the property. And it was, covered. It was amazing inside. There was actually hay bales from like I guess it must have been like the late 70s, early 80s. So it's like amazing that this place didn't go up in flames. It just been sitting there falling in on itself. And so one of the first things we did was we got our highway department to go in, just get all that vegetation off of there, get everything out, all the old hay bales, the debris, all the trash. So we could really see the bones of the structure. And, at first everyone's like, oh, it's definitely going to be a tear down project. But we got, and this is after it was cleaned up a little bit. Um, and it was great to like have the highway department get involved because I think certainly in our municipality, I'm sure where you live as well, there's like real tradition of working in silos. And so this initiative is actually pulling in multiple departments of our town and communication, like it's something we have to continue to work on because this is again a very new approach for the municipality. Doing something like this, they've never done this before. And in all my research of like reaching out to other municipalities, like I don't know that this is really common. I know there's maybe like one town here in Massachusetts that has done something similar. So it's great to be able to, work with the highway department and as well as our engineers. But we were able, once we got it all cleaned out, we were able to get a architectural firm that specializes in historic barn restoration to come out, do a structural assessment, and see, is it worth stabilizing? Is there potential? And absolutely there is. So it's really exciting that just, I guess, the beginning of January, they started construction on stabilizing the barn. And it's amazing just to see the progress every week. So it's very exciting. Um, so we knew that we needed to sort of get some information and get a pulse on what the real issues were for our local farmers, our current farmers in town. So as I mentioned, the purchase came on the heels of our comp plan update, and so part of that process, we had a focus group. It was the ag business focus group, and so it was a group of farmers, large landowners in town, and they actually had done a similar group back in 2008. And so I went back and I looked at their report from 2008, and then I read the report from 2022, and I'm like, these are identical. Like the same issues that were challenges in 2008 are still problems in 2022. So obviously, like we have somewhere to start, and maybe some of these things can be addressed. We were also looking at, I mean, there's so many different great resources out there right now in public policy, and a lot of them have these like overlapping recommendations. So we didn't need to reinvent the wheel. So we looked at, reports like the National Young Farmers Survey, which tells us that for young farmers, land access is the number one challenge. And for BIPOC farmers, that's, even greater challenge. Oops. Um, so looking at American Farmland Trust, really just understanding the threat of our viable farmland has on a national level, and understand what some of those repercussions could be. Our county also has a ag farmland protection plan, and so again, just like trying to like stack and layer all these recommendations, being like, we have the case for support here. Like we have all these different entities telling us these are the things that we need to do to make sure that there is farming in the future, which we all depend on. So as we began to like get all this information, there was some three like really clear themes emerged. It was like, agricultural themes, about protecting farmland, soils of importance, land access, um, just all the things. There's just like, so many things. And of course, when I started talking about this like early on, everyone in town was like, whoa. Because this is like a new approach. This is like, why would a town do this? It's like, well, because we have the opportunity and we have resources that like a private farmer doesn't have. When we bought the land and it was a $3 million purchase, it was appraised at $4.2 million. Like what farmer can afford that? I mean, the farmer that had been renting it, and even though he has this mega dairy farm that's very successful, he couldn't afford the land. But we had these designated funds. Um, and I can tell you a little bit more about how we happened to have that much because it was like this really weird thing. The pandemic actually worked in our favor in that. Um, but so we have all these, these themes, all these things that we could address through the Heath Farm Initiative. So we continued information gathering. So these are just the list of organizations that I've been talking to since the beginning. Really trying to grasp like what are the opportunities, what are the challenges that clients are facing, or a lot of ag service providers. Because again, these are the people that know. Like we wanted to go to the experts and hear from them. We've also been talking, since day one with the tribal liaison from the Stockbridge Muncie, wanting to keep them involved in the whole process. If there's an opportunity for land back at some point, which is a sensitive subject, like it's something that some things have to be handled in different ways because not everyone at the municipal level like thinks these things are important, right? So there's again opportunity for raising collective awareness and educational opportunities. But talking to you know Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust has been a really wonderful, um, you know, organization to start to work with, and just getting a sense of, what are the opportunities, what are the things that we could do that would actually be of service to the farming community. We also wanted to get a sense just from our town residents, so like our non-farming folks, what they thought. So we took all those conversations with all those groups and all the things that they suggested, like maybe we'd want to pursue these, it'd be cool to have a community kitchen, or it'd be really neat to have like a place where we could all come and like give workshops about, maybe it's a business or marketing, or maybe it's more technical to some, type of specific farming practice. So we created a story map, which is kind of a neat online tool. So it's like an interactive map, and you would scroll through the site. We broke up the land into different areas so we could talk about different uses, and we had that feedback survey out, and then we were able to look and see what was of interest to the broader community, and that gave us kind of just like a starting point. So we then like officially said, okay, this initiative is an official thing. It's an exploration of equitable and sustainable agricultural, educational, and recreational pursuits in the town of Bethlehem. Such a mouthful. Word salad. But mm, so the town board then appointed an advisory committee, and this is our 10-person, I guess 11-person advisory committee, including myself, who was kind of like the chair of it and coordinating all of the parts. Um, if you look at this picture, you might be like, yeah, it's not a very diverse group of people. But if you look at some of our other boards and committees in town, like usually it's, mostly retired people that have time on their hands. They have time to, and we really wanted to make sure that we had farmers involved. We wanted to make sure we had agricultural service providers involved, educators. And so we met for 13 months at 8 a.m. in the morning to accommodate that. We also, wanted to accommodate mothers of young children, including myself. So we often had like, kids running around. One of the older kids would kind of help corral, but again, it was like really important to have all those voices at the table. Hmm. So the committee was tasked with providing recommendations to the town for the future activity, and the land use on the 307 acres. And each of these members to, like if I kind of cropped the photo. I like the photo when it's full length because you can see just how many work boots are there, you know. So it was a good good group. We brought to the table like a lot of information. I presented a lot of information just about like attributes and the characteristics of the land, different things, just so that everyone would be coming away with like, thinking about this with like the same knowledge of the land base. We also brought in a lot of different people to present, sort of like expert presentations. So we had presentations from American Farmland Trust on regenerative agriculture, like what that is. Because if you talk to like most of the longtime farmers in our town, if you say regenerative agriculture, they're like, what? What is that? If you say the word green manure, they're like, uh, so there's really like even within our farming community, there's a lot of room for education. Um, so we had a presentation from Molly from American Farmland Trust, who runs their Farmland for the Next Generation program, which was incredible because one of the things that I hear a lot from current farmers and longtime farmers in town is that no one wants to farm. There's no young people out there that want to farm because their children don't want to farm. And so Molly was able to come in and she said, well, we have this great website. It's kind of like a, farm seekers, connecting farm seekers with farmers seeking land. And she put in, while we were there, she just put in a couple things, little like attributes and characteristics about the location and the size. And what do you know, like 50 different listings of people, individuals popped up. And it's like, well, that's a good start, Maybe it's not the right fit for all of them, but there are young farmers out there. So it's incredible how many like misconceptions about farming exist still. My other favorite misconception in town is that you can only grow hay and corn in the town of Bethlehem. To which I say, well, if that's all you plant, that's all you can grow, right? We actually have really wonderful soils in town. And it was interesting listening to the plenary this morning, because it's been conventionally farmed for a very long time. Even though we have prime farmland soils and soils of statewide importance, there are all these beautiful silt loams. They are so compacted and they're so degraded and they've been so extracted of nutrients and health and quality and all the things. And so that to me is like a cool opportunity because this spring we're going to go do like full soil health profile. In New York, we also have a soil health program, so that we can get a good baseline idea of what the soil's at now, so that down the road when we have more regenerative organic practices happening, we can have that data to compare, which I think will be really interesting. Hmm. Oops. Okay, this is a picture that I love because when I graduated from the farm management program at McGill, I was one of two women in the whole program. And so the fact that we have, and we even have like our littlest farmer there in the corner. This was our architect, Sophia Lane, giving a presentation about the barn. And so I just thought it was just awesome. I mean, there's a lot of men in the room as well, but for me personally, that was really great. Hmm. So our vision statement, after like taking in all this information, is that, well, it's right there. You can see. So we're looking at, promoting equitable and sustainable agriculture, as well as trying to integrate some recreation and education as well. And the education piece, I'll talk a little bit more about. But we really also want to explore a variety of land stewardship options. So it's 307 acres. We have the ability to do a lot of different things. We could take a lot of different approaches. We could try something that doesn't work. Okay, plan B, let's try something else. And we also, again, want to be able to connect the greater community with the land, with farming. And so that's where the recreation piece comes in. But we have to be very thoughtful about that because, of course, you don't want to like cross country runners like running through your field or like right by the tractor or anything like that. And we really see that there's a real need, I think, for people to become more connected to them, to each other within the community and to the land and all of that. So with agriculture, we really want to promote farming of today and tomorrow. And again, that like narrative that we hear all over and over in town is that there's no future in farming. But if you don't have a willingness to adjust your practices, if you're still farming like you did in the late 80s and you did, your father did in the late 40s, like there's a need to adjust and to pivot. So, some of the core issues that we talked a lot about in the advisory committee meetings were, what are the drivers of farmland loss, conversion to other uses, talking about like once farmland is developed, it is gone. And we have so many solar developments coming through, and they say, oh, yeah, in 20 years, we're going to decommission everything. I'm like, what does that really mean? Is that really still viable farmland? We also talked a lot about just the challenges to young farmers and first generation farmers, farmers of historically excluded and marginalized communities that face, systemic, even greater systemic challenges to accessing land. There's a real interest as well in supporting our veteran community through this project. So whether that's through farming or just outdoor, opportunities to really, do mindfulness, meditation, forest bathing, all of that. And again, like everything's all about climate resilience and adaptation. And again, like we really have to, I mean, it's so important. It's really nice though to be at a conference where I don't have to like convince you that that's important. So thanks for that. Um, so these are like our recommendations for the agriculture is really we need to, and we're going to enroll it in our ag district. So New York State has, right to farm protection, and it's built into law. Because it was a developer that owned all this land before, he just intended to develop it. So he never enrolled it in the ag district, which just adds an extra protection from nuisance complaints for the farmer, whether it's a farmer that owns it or a farmer is leasing it. But it's so important now, especially because there's 96 new apartment buildings across the street. So we want to do that. We're going to do that right away. We also want to protect the land in perpetuity. So, and one of the other misconceptions is that because the town bought it with dedicated funds, that it's safe from development forever. And it absolutely is not. There's nothing in the deed, there's nothing attached to the deed that says you cannot develop. And just because our town leadership right now is very conservation oriented and thinks this is important, like that could swing the complete opposite way in the future. And so we want to make sure that we protect the land in a way that it can't be dismantled. So doing perpetual conservation easements. We're also looking to do like a preemptive purchase right, which is like an extra restriction that would require when the land is conveyed or sold, it has to go to an eligible farmer. So, and we're building the criteria of what that definition is. But we want to make sure that this land's available for farming beyond our lifetime and like 4 generations. Um, so we'll be doing that through lease again this year. Because of course, sale of farmland and putting those protections in place does take time. So this is like very much a multi-phase project. And then one thing that our advisory committee is really recommending is, continuing to explore the potential to create an agricultural center. Because we have this wonderful barn complex that's now being stabilized, so it will be available for use and future full renovation. So the variety of land access opportunities. So in talking with a lot of young farmers, talking with New Folk Land Trust, the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust, and just looking at to what are the best opportunities for secure tenure and for access. And so if it's leasing, it's like a minimum of 5 years lease so that you can really get the crop rotations down. um, start to build the soil health and really be able to experience the benefits of that. But maybe even more importantly, it's a long-term lease with option to purchase. Because not everyone has the capital ready to purchase, even at the ag value. So I think we're open to exploring different pathways, and just an acknowledgement that like we'd love to be able to demonstrate the use of some of these tools, like the ground lease, which I think is a really great tool that I don't think is used that often, where it's a long-term lease. So the farmer leasing it does have the ability to invest in infrastructure, and build equity, so that at that time, the time where they decide to move on, they can sell those structures, sell that infrastructure, so they have had some equity built in. And so leasing right now, it's with a single farm business. I'm very excited that this year's lease that's about to go out, or RFA, we are going to provide a couple different lease options. And so incremental again, we will likely, a lot of the farmland will probably be farmed by this dairy farm again. But we want to make sure that we're intentional in creating these opportunities, that we're going to, be able to provide some infrastructure like hook up to water. So that takes some time, or leasing to a nonprofit organization. We recognize that, like at the municipality, like we're not going to really get into like the day-to-day management of like an ag center, or if there's multiple farmers leasing the land. So we'd love to work with a nonprofit entity to sort of manage that. Um, Selling to another public agency is like that got put on the list. I don't think that's a good idea. It just seems like passing it off to another entity that then it's just, we need to make sure it's in the hands of farmers. So, but again, we could protect with easements and really sell that land at the ag value. So making it a little bit more affordable, or a lot more affordable actually, by extinguishing those development rights. And that's what I do a lot of, like outside of this project for the town, is establishing these conservation easements, which I wish I went to law school now, because that would have been really helpful. These are very, legal documents. So, we wanted to make sure that we could provide some like very loose like renderings and visuals for people. But we talk a lot about next generation farmers. So not people that are currently farming, but first generation farmers, young farmers, Black, Indigenous farmers of color, farmers that don't have that generational wealth to, in the form of land and the form of livestock and equipment. Um, and that includes people that have the desire to farm for livelihood, and have the experience and the education, but maybe just don't have those other assets that you need to really make it happen. And I get real fired up about this because I'm like myself, like a failed young farmer, I guess. Not failed, but I had my own challenges accessing land. I couldn't, even with a degree and a lot of work experience in other people's operations. And I even had like a full on like 5-year business plan with the financial ratios and the proper, all of that. I could not get an ag lender to work with me. I had a number of different like opportunities to work on other people's land, like a non-operator owner, but that came with like all kinds of strings attached, kind of weird expectations about what they wanted to see out their window, and it didn't always align with like the reality of farming. Um, so that's why I really love this project. Um, so then Ag Center, there's a really great example in Chester, New York, but it's basically an arrangement where farmland's made available to multiple farmers. But there's access to shared equipment, shared infrastructure, all the other things that are really hard and expensive to obtain. Like maybe you get the land access piece, but then what about all the irrigation? What about like your wash pack station? All of those things. So being able, again, as a municipality, having certain resources, or also just the ability to be like the lead on certain grants. Um, you know, we're happy to like work together with a nonprofit or farmers to make this happen. And again, we have this wonderful barn. And again, we wanted to make sure that we could like show what it could be in the future. Um, Hmm. So some of the unique features, and I know there's a different, a couple different like ag centers around, or farm centers. Hearing about Grow Food in Northampton, that's definitely on my list of places to visit, and talk to. But we want to be able to, again, provide opportunities for technical assistance for farmers, for farm business viability. So it could, aside from like crop production, crop related things, like the marketing piece, just like how to like all the business filings, all the different things, HR practices, good personnel practices. It would also provide a site for demonstration of farming techniques. Something I've learned just by working with farmers is that like no one's really going to like take the risk in investing in planting something brand new or doing something brand new without having seen it. Like the farmers, they want to see it work. They want to ask questions. They want to, so being able to provide a demonstration site for some of those things is really important because again, most of our current farmers in town are not doing organic practices or sustainable practices. Um, Unfortunately, like on this land, I mean, the soils are, it's basically been in corn, 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 hay. There's a lot to be improved upon. Um, so, but I think the unique purpose to this ag center is to provide education for the local community and to really help promote the connection between the consumer and the producer. And there's a lot of interest in town. We presented this vision plan to the town board just last week, and there was like a dozen high school students there, which was super cool because usually again it's mostly like retired people, and nothing against retired people, but like we want to have other voices present in these public processes. And so we had students from the environmental club talking about how they wanted to learn more about what organic vegetable production was like, or different aspects of farming. So we've been talking to a lot of different entities, and I showed that list before. um, but I just to one note on partnerships is um, somebody asked me the other day if like if how are things going? Like, are you guys like everyone's ever signed up and, whatever. And I'm like, this is intentional partnership establishment. Like it takes years, it takes a long time. You have to go at the pace of trust and all of that. And so, we do have a number of organizations that are really excited about different aspects that really complement their mission or existing programs that they have. And I think we recognize too that like you can engage a greater scope, a greater part of the community by working with partnering organizations that have their own stakeholders and have their own clients and people that they're serving. And of course for grant funding, being able to have that public private partnership is always wonderful. So for education, again, we wanted to really have some community-oriented educational programs to raise, our collective understanding, and also, I think it's really important for like the younger generation. It's like to really be able to have that from day one. Uh, so our recommendations are really to, prioritize creating these types of opportunities for agriculture, sustainability, conservation, and really keep trying to keep the community engaged throughout the whole process. So I do a lot of just like if somebody calls me up and they want to talk about this and they want to ask questions or give me ideas, or sometimes it's just like they have complaints because they don't understand what's going on and why are we even doing this? Like it's an important part. And it goes back again, having like somebody to field those calls, somebody to like talk to people because it's really important. And we also the committee is recommending to the town that we really maximize the impact of an ag center by reusing this barn. We're stabilizing it now. It's going to be there. Is a place to do a lot of interesting things and good things. The recreation piece is really all about promoting community well-being and quality of life. So we, have heard from like our high school cross country team. They want to have like a perimeter trail so that they can have a soft surface to run on that's just like a different location. Again, they're really excited about seeing farming close up. And there's a really wonderful example of this in Saratoga Springs, New York, the Pitney Meadow Community Farm. And so it's great to be able to look at another community and be able to glean something that they've done that could work really well for us. And recreation, also, we're kind of folding into that community gardening. We have a great community gardening organization in our area. So looking at creating, um, a multi-generational use garden. So something that is universally accessible with both traditional raised beds and elevated raised beds. We want, the full breadth of the community to be able to spend time here and enjoy it. I don't know. I like this. I do yoga there for sure. Um, And I think this is in there again. But so we have a lot of aspirational things that we're doing a lot, and also a lot of things that are just going to take time. So we have some like more concrete next steps. So it's the ag district enrollment, as well as reestablishing a community garden and doing the perimeter trail. We're also doing a couple small things. We took one of the fields out of the lease agreement because it was just like essentially a wet meadow. And last year I said, well, why don't we just stop having him mow it and let's see what happens? And what do you know? Like what comes up is, I don't know, 4 different species of native goldenrod, some native asters, but also a whole lot of purple loosestrife. And so we're going to do, we're working with Capital Region Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management, to do some control on the biocontrol on the population. So we're able to start with some small things while we continue to explore and really start to solidify some of our partnerships. Um, again, partnering with agricultural organizations to do sort of the agricultural piece of things, educational organizations to do the education. But all of this takes time, and it's okay to do it in incremental ways. So what we're doing is one speed. Our neighboring town is doing something sort of similar, but it's a different approach and a different process. So incremental steps is okay. Doing a little bit is better than nothing. Um, and so we have now completed our vision plan, which I got one hard copy here, but if you're interested in sort of exploring it, you can read the full document. But we also created another interactive map so you can kind of scroll around, and it's more abbreviated version. So again, highlights some of the different areas and some of the uses that we're recommending. Um, but yeah, so that's sort of all I got. I'm happy to answer any questions. You know, I'm a little scattered. We just finished this. It was a big process. It was 13 months of work of working with a committee. And if you've ever worked with a committee, it's an experience. I think I learned a lot of diplomacy skills. But I think we had some really robust conversations, and the outcome I think is stronger because of it. So thank you very much. Yeah. Mhm. So we closed on the property in 2023, in February 2023. And that was after 4 years of discussing and negotiating with the landowner. Mm. Our intention is not to get into the business of farming. We have the opportunity and the funds and the resources to buy this land from a developer who is never going to sell to a farmer, but now we intend to like keep the farmers on the land and invite more farming. So yeah, there is lots of similarities. We do work really closely with our local land trust, which is the Mohawk Hudson Land Conservancy. And we recently also purchased 68 acres in the south part of town for a community forest with Department of Environmental Conservation funds. And we didn't set out to create this like corridor of connectivity, but if you map all the Heath Farm properties along with some of our other conservation areas, there's like a very clear like north to south corridor happening. And there's just little pockets that of private owned land. So, I'm working with those landowners to see if they're open to creating like either offering like a access easement. So if we were able to do like a full town trail north to south with in cooperation with the land trust. And that's a great thing. Like we want to make sure that we stay flexible to future opportunities. And so that's why we didn't want to just like protect it and sell it right away, because we might be missing out on some really important opportunities. And I think coordinating all these things that are going on and collaborating is just going to have greater community impact, right? So thanks. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, in 2019, when the town board passed the Farms and Forests resolution, they created this capital fund. Basically, it's the Farms and Forest Capital Fund, and our comptroller did some like calculation where it's if they're at the end of the year, if there's a surplus of I think it's like sales tax and property taxes, whatever's like over the budget, it gets rolled into either, a portion of it gets rolled into this Farms and Forest Capital Reserve Fund or into a parkland set aside fund. So we have a couple different capital reserve funds. And with the pandemic, everyone was suddenly shopping locally a lot more than they were. But we also didn't have to hire, we were a municipality. So we also hire, I don't know how many seasonal lifeguards and, camp personnel and all of that. So none of those people got hired. And so we didn't have all those expenses that we were budgeting for. And amazingly, $2 million of surplus rolled into that fund. And so that's really that. Plus, we did have some ARPA funding that we put towards it. And then some of the parkland set aside fund. And again, some of that land will be designated for public access, more recreational uses, but not ball fields, something that's very complementary to the farming. Yeah. Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's something like I love connecting with people that have experience, like whether it's successes or failures, because there's something to be learned. But I think, as a farmer or former farmer myself, like, let me see. I mean, having, yeah, public use close to crops, can be really tricky. And I mean, I think this is a good example. Think, yeah, so thinking of, oh no, was it failed like from the public access perspective, or like as a like it was hard to like farm with people all over the place? People getting to the fields. Yeah. Mhm. Oh yeah. Right. I know. Yeah. And that's, I mean, yes, these are all things that we're going to have to consider, especially as we get down to the nitty gritty of just like designating specific uses for specific parcels. And let me see if I can just go back to the, oh, hi. Okay. I wasn't supposed to do that. I don't know what I did. Okay, this is just getting worse. Or steel stove. Yeah. So I think we have to be, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to get this out of my face. Yeah, I think we have to be really careful about where we open those spots up. So, like I mentioned, so we have this north end in one hamlet where it's definitely like that's closer to all the residential development. That's where we have those 96 apartments, and there is like a nice path that goes towards the farm and a crosswalk that essentially just goes to a hayfield. But in the south part of town, it's very different. It's much more rural, and so I think thinking about keeping like the number one on the left there and number three, those are, and number one around the barn, those are the places we're thinking of really like that's where maybe public access is invited, but maybe not on these larger parcels. And so I think we really have to like be intentional about that, but also, yeah, talk to people that have done it, like what doesn't work. And the whole like people throwing trash and I mean, that's people can be the worst, but I think that, it's important to have that educational component. Like, why shouldn't you just throw your cigarette butt out? Like there's just a lot of opportunity, I think, to bring people in to start talking about some of these things. And so it's, yeah, we're going to definitely have some failures. I will say that, like, it's not going to be smooth sailing for sure, but yeah, thank you. Yeah. Oh, wow. All the questions. I'll start right here. Not specifically, but it's a, yeah. Right, right. So it's interesting. They're very, we do have in town code, which is really wonderful, that it prohibits on town-owned land the application of pesticides. And it was really more for our parks. People didn't want their kids running on the ball fields if they had been sprayed. So our community is kind of like they're pretty good. Like they're pretty far along. It's a very conservation oriented community on the most part. But yeah, I mean, that definitely, that was a requirement of our last year's lease, was that there was no pesticides grown and that you needed to sign, this affidavit. Basically, we needed to, make sure that we had some sort of, protection against that. And so going forward as a town, you know, that's one thing about protecting and selling for private farm operations, that we can't tell a farmer what to spray and what not to spray on their land if we don't own it. But if we own that land and it's a lease agreement or some sort of, agreement with the farmer, between the farmer and the town, we can suddenly like have more influence on whether there's sustainable practices being employed or not. And so that's, what we have a lot of pros and cons, or reasons why we might retain ownership of land or why we might sell. So all of these things we have to sort of take into account. Yeah. Purple shirt. Yeah. Yeah, I will say, so our town supervisor, like he was part of these 4 years of negotiation, and really like, without his involvement and like his support and like wanting these things to happen, a lot of this wouldn't have happened, right? So we did have the capital reserve fund to actually acquire the land. But to do the assessment, I mean, that's something that we went to the town board and we basically, gave our case about why we should at least look into it. And really the community, because so many people remember going to the dairy farm when they were younger, like there's a lot of nostalgia for the building. So it was at least worth it to look into. So, again, our comptroller is like a wizard. He's always able to find like funds or like move things around so that we can really prioritize the projects that we want to. One thing though I'm realizing this year is like we finished the vision plan very recently. We're starting off with implementation right away, but we don't necessarily have funding in place because everyone's budget for 2025 is already set. So there's definitely grants, discretionary funds, working with our legislator and our, our senator. Um, but that nonprofit piece, the ability to fundraise to get some of these things done is going to be really important. But we're also, hoping to, especially because the barn and the houses as well, they're assets of the town. That for next year, hopefully we'll be able to just build into our budget, some of those things. But we know that we want to have land surveyed so we can start building those things out. It's going to take time, but yeah. And I will say that, we're working on really working together as different departments, the parks department, the highway department, who's done some of the maintenance, and then our department, which is within the planning department. And there's like a real, like, people are very, they don't want to share, like everyone has their pot of money and gets very like protective of it. And I totally understand that. So it's really, we've gotten a couple like nature conservancy grants where it's great to be like, okay, this funding is designated for this use. You couldn't use it for sidewalks anyway, so yeah, but yeah, maybe the new nonprofit will find some like angel philanthropist and they'll fund the whole thing. Yeah. Yep. 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 Yeah, absolutely. No, no, those are really good questions. Yeah, so we're about 10 minutes from the city of Albany, and we're like centrally located in the greater capital region. So there's, Schenectady County. So the city of Troy, like, there's a lot of young people live in Troy. It's like a 20-minute commute. The wonderful thing, like this year, like we're leasing the land for $45 an acre a year. So, talking to farmers that are farming in the Hudson Valley that are leasing for much more than that. And they're also, I talked to one farmer who's commuting like an hour and 15 minutes to the site that she's leasing, and it's just not sustainable. So the fact that is, down in the southern part, this is where the two residential structures are as well. So we're kind of pursuing like, is there a way that we can partner with a group to restore those, bring them back up to like, the state for occupancy and provide some housing along with the land. But we're so close to the city of Albany, the city of Troy. Like there's opportunities. Like it's not unreasonable to think that there might be some people that want to commute. And again, with the being able to create land access opportunities specifically for first generation farmers or for BIPOC farmers. I mean, that's something that takes that intentional relationship building. So one of the people that we had come to talk to the committee was Christine Hutchinson. She is the Black Land Stewardship Cultivation Co-Director of the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust. And so I've been talking to her for about 3 years. She's come out and done a couple site visits. And again, it's like, we're trying to be like very reciprocal in nature with, and understanding that, everyone's capacity is very limited too. So like you can't force these things. But I've been talking a lot to Christine specifically about, you know, the Northeast NEFOC has like a whole network of farmers. It's like a listserv. So being able to promote some opportunities through their listserv, through their farmers. Also Soulfire Farm, which is not too far from us in Grafton, New York, has a whole cohort of alumni that have gone through their programs. And so we're in contact with them as well. And that's really like, it's not so much, it's like the relationship building, right? Like the town itself isn't really doing that. That's like me. I think it's important. And I've been, given permission to like run with it, right? So I am. There's also some through New York State Ag and Markets does have like a farmland protection grant program. Right after we bought this property was interesting. They had a new eligibility category, which was specifically municipalities selling farmland to BIPOC producers. And I was like, oh, thanks for creating that fund. So that's probably one thing that we'll pursue because that is funds to extinguish the development rates and get farmers on the land. So it takes time. Somebody called me the other day and they're like, oh, have you like achieved everything you set out to as far as equity? I was like, what? I was like, now, like today? And it's like, no, this is never ending work. This is work that you have to keep at, it's been eye opening. It's just again, it's a new approach. It's a different approach because it is not that capitalist colonized approach. We're really trying to be more reciprocal in nature here. So. All right. No more questions? Thank you. Thanks so much. Oh yeah. So I put it away. But yeah, so we built a website because our town website, it's so hard. I can't even find my own like sub page on the town website. So if you go and you know what, it's amazing because Squarespace makes it like so easy for someone like me to build a website. So you can go to our website. If you go there, you can also access the vision plan, the interactive website, and that's what will be posted. Like all of our information from like all our advisory committee meetings are there. There's some really great presentations with just like some really wonderful information. So we're going to keep all that up. But as far as like RFAs, when we put out the RFA for the lease agreements this year, we'll put it up there as well as like spreading that through the NEFOC listserv, the young farmers listserv of the, but yeah, the website's the best way. And Instagram, we got an Instagram handle now too. And I have a hard copy if anyone wants to like peruse.